Brian Preston, the money guy.
So let's change and let's talk about housing now, because you're in a different place when you've got an army of dollar bills. You're now a general, and you're such a good general that the army of dollar bills are just showing up. You don't even have to really recruit anymore. You're still doing the 20-25%, but that's a much smaller portion of the total army than it once was. So here's the guidelines. If you're 35 and over and you're buying a house, it's probably not your first house. And even if it is your first house, you need to put down 20%.
Sure.
This is where the guidelines of 20% I think makes sense. And
wouldn't you agree that 35 is somewhat of an arbitrary number? I think what we're going, if you're 10 to 15 years into your career, is that a fair assessment? If you're kind of at that stage and you're starting to work into your stage, your goal should be when you buy your house, 20% down.
You're trying to give some love to those doctors you picked on earlier.
Look, they just got out of med school, and you told them they got to put 20% down. That's a little
I appreciate
aggressive.
you giving them some love. That's kind of like a makeup call in a football game.
That's right.
Is that you picked on them on one thing, so you came back and gave them some love. So I think that is smart. So, but this also, when you have to put down 20%, it leads to the next point in your kind of your internal checklist is, what's the why of this house that you're buying? Because I do worry. Here's the thing I worry about, and this is something, and I've shared this in other shows. You're going to reach a level of success, and remember, we live in this society where everybody's always telling us, go bigger, go better.
That's right.
There's all kind of songs on the radio talking about success and telling you to be as successful as possible. So you need to understand when you're buying bigger and bigger houses, what's the why? What's the motivation for why you are thinking about buying this vehicle? I mean, this house. I don't know why I said vehicle, but this house. And I thought about two examples. I've already given Dave Ramsey took some flack because he bought a very nice house. And a lot of people really gave him a lot of trouble with that, even though we know he paid cash for it, even though we know he gives great to charity, even though we know he is probably many times over financially independent already, and he employs a gazillion people as well. But Dave uses his house. A lot of people probably don't realize this, to do a lot of charitable work, a lot of fundraisers, entertaining, and other things. And I had a friend who's a financial advisor who I see every year at conferences, really like talking with him, and for his church, they use his house for a lot of the activities. He gets a lot of enjoyment. And another thing, he uses it for business too. I mean, he will have groups over to entertain. Sure. So the house becomes a function and extension of the why of, has a purpose. Yep. It's not just big for the sake of being big. Yeah, to flex on everybody. Sure. I'm sure it has some of that benefit, but there's actually a functional side to it. So understand the why of what you're doing. And Bo, you and I've talked, having a special needs child, I think a swimming pool is not the best financial decision, but the life benefits outweighed the financial cost of getting a swimming pool
Your last house
for my special needs daughter.
Did not have one. Your current house does, and it's added to the quality of life you guys have. And so it wasn't purely a financial decision. There was more that went into the why behind
So know the why. I think that's a good place to be. Now, the second thing I would have you do before you buy that next nice house, when you're established, is you need to make sure you've accounted for all the ongoing expenses. And guys, I can tell you this one from my own personal experience. The nicer I've lived, this is my third house.
Okay.
And as you go upstream, you're going to notice the cost of pine straw, the cost of repairs, the cost of people coming to paint or caulk.
Right.
It goes up. I don't understand. The houses get a little bit bigger, but incrementally compared to where the size of the first house was, I mean, we're talking 1,000 square feet, but somehow the costs have gone up well over 50, 60, 70%. And you start realizing there's a premium charge for the nicer your neighborhood is. If you have somebody, now I cut my own grass. Y'all probably, I'm like Larry Bird. You come by on a Saturday, you go see Brian out there cutting his own grass. Well, that's what awesome. He used to cut his own grass. There's be a whole group of people watching him. And I love that about him. But so I'm kind of the same way. But if you had somebody cutting your grass or bringing in pine straw, they're going to charge you more the nicer your neighborhood is. And you're also going to notice the repairs, the renovations, the ongoing upkeep.
Yep.
The more toys you have in your house. I mean like gadgets.
Yeah.
The more likely the cost there is to break.
And Brian, you've mentioned this before, and I didn't realize this until previously. So everything you just said is kind of qualitative. Quantitatively, if you lived in a gated community, naturally your roads are no longer something that the community pays for. You're responsible for having to improve on that. So moving into that nicer neighborhood, HOA fees go up. All those things increase. You have to kind of be mindful of that, just like you said, as you sort of start to swim upstream.
Give you a perspective. I thought HOA fees down in Georgia, they're practically nothing. I mean, you think it's expensive. You're spending $800 a year on HOA fees, and that's with a big old pool. Okay. You moved to Nashville, and maybe you guys in California go right me back. That's even cheap. And I thought it was crazy. A lot of neighborhoods up here, it's $250, but there are neighborhoods that are $600 to $650 a month.
Yeah.
And I was like, do they cut your grass? No, that's just to cover the private streets and other things. You know what things cost before you pull the trigger and buy on it. And then, Bo, you gave me, when we were doing show note prep, you brought up, what's the effect when, I always say toys begot toys, or, you have all these empty rooms, or I pick on my wife. She buys a new pair of shoes. All of a sudden now she needs a shirt, a blouse that matches it. What's that effect called?
It's called the Diderot effect, right? And it's named after, you can go look up the story, but a guy who got a robe and all this. I mean, it's a really cool story, but essentially it's exactly that. The toys beget toys idea. That once you buy that big house, well, then you do have to get the lawn maintenance. Then you do have to fill up the rooms, and you do have to get the entertainment package and the big TVs and TVs in all the rooms. And it's just one of those things that the cost of the house is not the only cost that you pay. So you have to be mindful of that.
And then last, this is a given. A bigger house is going to have higher utilities, higher insurance, higher taxes.
That's right.
I mean, and here's the thing. You don't really get an incremental benefit from paying higher utilities, higher taxes. So it's just make sure you understand those things before you make the decision.